This episode is brought to you by Mortgage Workflow Partners and the Mastering Encompass series, both for users as well as administrators. You can find out all the information about it over at masteringencompass.com. Also, if you'd like to check out what we're doing on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to the channel using the @MasteringEncompass handle. And make sure you stay up to date on all the information, not just with podcasts, but also video content that we bring to you as often as possible. Now let's get on to the episode. Here we go, everybody. Welcome. My name is Larry Bailey with Mortgage Workflow Partners. Thanks very much for coming to today. We're going to be admitting everybody into the meeting. I'm sure some folks will be rolling in. We set these up to come out every other Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern. So I'm hoping that you came here to learn some stuff. That's the whole idea. If you're watching this kind of in the beginning, if you're not part of the Mastering Encompass community, what are you waiting for? It's free to join. Join up. Today's event, today is October 7th, 2025, and today's event is all about the final pass between processing and underwriting, where we are trying to go in and fetch the underwriting clear to close, whatever that means for whatever channel you're talking about. So a couple of ground rules. First of all, this is meant to be interactive, although it's usually just me kind of talking and showing. We're going to be going over desktop today. We're also going to be going over web today and how that interacts between processing and underwriting, especially on the clear to close. It gets pretty interesting. So I'll be talking about concepts. The whole framework for all of this really you'll find in the resource center on masteringencompass.com. There are a total of 12. Today is number 9. And we are going to take, again, this is for the final pass between processing and underwriting clear to close. Next week or next event, we'll get into between the ICD and closing docs and what to do there, as well as post-closing trailing docs. And then last but not least, it's all about the money, because if you make lots of money, but then you have to give it all away, what did you really keep? So we're going to talk about loan level profitability and analytics. So having said all that, first of all, because today's again topic is between processing and underwriting, are there any processors in the crowd? Feel free to use your raise hand feature inside of the Teams there. Looks like we don't have any. We got one processor. Trina, excellent. Trina, if you don't mind, you can put it in chat, so no pressure. But as a processor, what would be the number one thing that you feel slows files down? Would it be communication of what you're missing? Would it be lack of ability to fetch things that you need? Or would it be that you just don't have enough time to get to everything because you got too much going on? Or D, something else? If you don't mind sharing that in chat, that would be totally cool for me. And Sean, for you, you train your processors. Tell me in as few words as you want, but how do you train your processors to manage good communications, to know how they stay on top of what they need, a little of it all? Okay, Trina, I kind of expected that. But Sean, for you, how would you say when you go to train, how do you make sure that processing really understands how to make sure they're managing their outstanding conditions and document requests? Do you use checklists? Do you use reminders? What is it that you use if you train others? What is it that you use to help keep people in line? So Sean uses alerts. Okay, great. So today I'm gonna talk about a few things that I would use if I were to start a company today, which I'm not. But there are a few features that I want to kind of draw out. I'm going to start with something that everybody's using, which is desktop. So we'll go over here, and because we are in desktop, when you're chasing down conditions as a processor, you're typically working with underwriting conditions, and you're trying to typically find underwriting conditions that are added, which is all of these, of course. And the idea is that you're trying to figure out, as Sean points out, managing off alerts. Sean, I got news for you. All your processors are using spreadsheets. They're using something outside of Encompass to track, because one of the things you did not say that you're not using is workflow tasks. So we're going to talk about that a lot, and what progressive features that I'm going to guide you on. Because what we found in a lot of the workflow reviews that go on, when we actually ask different companies of all different sizes across the country from all different experience levels, how do you keep track of the things that you need, especially as it relates to chasing down final documents and submitting for clear to close for underwriting? So I'm going to take this in two main parts. The first part is, how do we actually leverage Encompass, and what would I do if I worked at your company? What would I put into play for processing? And then what would I do with underwriting? And we needed two angles on this. First angle is going to be off a desktop, because that's what everybody has. And then I'm going to show you how short of a hop it is to actually leverage a lot of features on Encompass Web for task management using workflow tasks, as well as condition management using enhanced conditions. Okay, so let's start. First of all, on screen, we have what most companies have right now. At least 3/4 of the companies are still using standard conditions. You're probably one of them. By the way, is anybody on the call today using enhanced conditions? Show of hands. Is anybody using enhanced conditions? Going once. We got Lisa using enhanced conditions. Great. We got 3, 4. Getting ready to flip the switch. Sean says that means you're going to be using standard conditions for quite some time. We got 5. So I don't know if everybody works at the same company, but something around 5 companies out of 25, which is about what we're seeing, right? 25%, 30% coverage of enhanced conditions. The reason why this is important is because I can't see conditions in Encompass Web unless I'm using enhanced. So like someone like Sean that's getting ready to flip the switch, assuming that Sean's going to do the right thing and say that if your loan's not in underwriting after 60 days, you got to start over. Just like we did back in 2021, we didn't let files go into operations with a 2009 1003. We made them change it to a 2020 1003. Same thing has to do with enhanced conditions. And why is this a big deal? Let me show you. So if we're working with standard conditions, of course, when we come into standard condition, this is what we're dealing with. Comments are hidden behind here, so that's a problem. Also, the ability to manage documents is not a big deal, but it's just not really ideal. And so as a processor, when I'm trying to chase a condition, some processors will mark it as requested. I think it's a complete waste of time. I don't want processors managing that. I want processors managing the documents. So if I know I need these documents from the borrower, if I could hit if I need these documents from the borrower, I'm going to click request. Now, the idea here is that if you go through and make a request, depending on what borrower interface your company is leveraging, whether it's Consumer Connect, which is ideal for what I'm going to show you, or if you're using Big POS, which will also leverage native functionality, but Big POS also has their own task platform. Encino, Blend, whatever others, they all have their own task platform, which are AKA things I need from my borrower. So you have to be really mindful of what I'm about to show you and really explain how things go. And the reason why I'm saying this is because if you're trying to tell the borrower what conditions are open, they don't know what that means. They really don't. Even if it says 2 months most recent pay stubs, what does that even mean? I know it sounds obvious, but does that mean like September, August? Or does that mean October, September? Like, what does that actually mean? So typically what you do in processing is you ask them for very specific things. You send an email, text message, maybe even a phone call if that exists anymore in your company. And the idea is you're requesting these things from the borrower. This is really critical because not only are we making the request, but we have to then document that we made the request for which things and when is it due by. So what do we have in desktop to leverage on that? Well, you got a bunch of things. You can certainly use the document here that you say you requested it, but you can't really tell when it's due. You could try to use this, but that's complicated if there already has files in it. So that's kind of a dead end. You can also go in and you can use tasks here, which again, you've got your native tasks. These things are a pain in the ass because they come in and you can change this. You can even set yourself for an alert to follow up on a certain date, but that's not really helpful because I can't see all the tasks that I need to see on this file from outside the file. I got to go in there. Unless I'm doing what Sean's doing, which is I'm relying upon alerts that there's a task overdue. That's complicated because again, it doesn't, you guys are getting my drift. So let me show you a better outcome. Let me show you how I would do it if I was reset, if it was my company doing what I would do. Now, the loan I'm going to bring up here is on web, obviously, and I'm using enhanced conditions because I can see the conditions in web. But what I want to show you here is that when I come in and I'm in the conditions tab, I'm still doing the same thing like you saw me do on desktop. Let's just look at docs because I don't care about these 101. Let's just pretend we've got some prior to docs conditions open. And I need the credit refresh to be done. This is a big deal. And for those that aren't using enhanced conditions yet, what are you waiting for? Got to get to enhanced conditions, because if you don't get to enhanced conditions, you can't do what I'm about to show you, which is a really big deal. So it's still important to make sure you understand that obviously the UI is nice. I can still do requested, which I don't like. I can still assign documents, which is totally fine. But what I'm really focusing on is the document itself. And I can still do manual doc requests, right? I can still come in here and check these guys off, and I can still hit request, and it will pick those two up and do the thing. But that's not where the money is. If I'm doing this manually, I need to make sure that I can track things properly. And so what I'm going to end up working off of is, if I go over into workflow tasks, I need to be able to make sure I can track these things in the workflow task for the things that are open and not finished based upon due dates with priority. And the reason why this is a big deal is because if I go over into my pipeline view as a processor, I need to make sure that I'm tracking these things for what are on schedule and what are overdue with, again, priority. So if I want to make sure I tackle first, for top priority number one, I got to do this first because that's happening. And I can check my notes, etc. I've gone over this before, so I don't want to be redundant. What I want to just focus in on is, Sean, to you, if you're rolling out enhanced conditions, I think that's great. If you're using alerts, I want you to really strongly consider leveraging workflow tasks, because workflow tasks exist both in desktop as well as web. The difference, obviously, in the user interface is that web gives us this task workspace that you don't have in desktop. So if I put this Mishta task here, I can go in and check it out. I just don't get the web UI workspace that I can. Not the end of the world, but what's really important is I can still see it. So as a processor, what I'm doing is I'm chasing down the important parts based upon deadlines that I have to make. And it's the work of chasing it, whether I'm chasing the loan officer for that, or I'm reassigning this task to, if your workflow is the loan officer chases docs, you get to do that. Or if it's you and you're chasing it, then it's assigned to, then I have it and it's on me. But here's what's going on. Here's where here's again the true value of this. If I can get if I can get my company leveraging workflow tasks in desktop or web, I get to do something really special starting November 8th if I've configured this properly. So if I go over here into my task pipeline, which is where I'm sitting, with 25.4, I'm going to have another section here that says all tasks. And this is the important part that I'm going to kind of, normally I don't get into like the admin weeds in these calls, but I want to share this with you because it's really important for me to explain how this is going to work. So with your Encompass admin, if it's you, pay attention. If it's not you, get this information to who it is, and make sure that you're leveraging in workflow management under the workflow task setting these task types. This is how you're going to organize your pipeline. And so what's really helpful in this entire 12-part comprehensive series is understanding how we're leveraging Encompass native to run an entire organization. I don't care how many channels you have of business or what type of loans you do or where your people are, whether they're all in the same building or not. The ability to manage a company from a screen is everything. And when I go to look at my pipeline view, I need to make sure I can track everything that's outstanding. And as of November 8th, I will be able to. So the goal of this workshop series was really to guide you through as far as these releases are coming out. As being part of the partner advisory board, I'm privy to know what's happening. So it was confirmed in the release notes. I'm going to be doing a free course on the Mastering Encompass that goes through the desktop release notes that have been issued. The web release notes are still preview, so I'm not going to do that just yet. But this weekend, if your TEBE, your testing environment, was updated to UAT, you'll be able to see this all tasks after this weekend. If you're like me, you're not getting the UAT update, you'll have to wait until production rolls out. So how do we do this in real life? I'm a processor and I'm working on desktop because, again, that's 3/4 of you. And I'll come back and just kind of flip the script for the rest of the group, but I'll talk to the majority first. You can go into workflow tasks. Now, if you're not seeing this in your own Encompass, that's because your administrator has not turned this on for your persona. It's a persona setting, just tick it, done. Now, these workflow tasks don't exist unless you provision them in the Encompass web settings that I just showed a moment ago. So if you ever need any help doing this, of course, you can ask in the community, or you can reach out to Mortgage Workflow Partners. We'll be guided to assist you in any size scope project you need. Lynn asked, have you ever tried to use a condition in the task priority and due date? I saw that in the task setting, but have not tried. Yes. Actually, Lynn, what you can do if you get really fancy, which is what we're doing right now for a few different projects, we're getting fancy, is you can prioritize the workflow tasks based upon conditional statements. So let's say that the review title is normally an average level, sorry, wrong one, an average level priority. But let's say we've got a purchase closing this in the next 5 days and the title still isn't reviewed. Through conditionality, we can actually increase this priority to number 1 being the highest. Super helpful for not only task assignment for things like this, but also resubmissions. And so as a processor, one of the things that we want to make sure happens is that we understand what's got to be done by when. Otherwise, we can't plan our day. And so when I go through as a processor, again, the whole topic of today is I'm processing and going for the clear to close. I need to comprehensively understand what's due on my condition list, whether it's standard or enhanced conditions, I don't care. But as a processor, how am I tracking what I'm missing? And that right there is the biggest workflow gap we find across all companies, is people trying to figure out what they're supposed to be getting and by when and what is it for. So if you think that's not happening in your organization because you've addressed it, that's fantastic. But if you think people are just doing that natively, they're doing their best. Most likely you can help them do better. So having said that, one of the other pieces that happens in the clear to close is doc expirations. Has anybody ever had that happen where somebody's chasing a document because it expired before the note date, but nobody realized it because nobody was paying attention? And so this again is one of those things where you need to make sure that you understand how you're tracking your expirations. Usually what we're doing as administrators is using a doc expiration calculation between all the dates of all your documents on a custom input form, and then you're rolling up through an administrative calculation for the earliest expiration date, and you're comparing that against the note date. It's usually how you do it. But there it sits, and usually it's a persona access to field button rule that says you're not allowed to order docs if the document's expiring. But what I always like to advocate here for is to notify people ahead of time. Now, in Sean's case, Sean might typically, and sorry, I'm picking on you, Sean, but you told me you use alerts, so I got to pick on you. Sean might use an alert, which again, at the pipeline view is great, except when they don't show up. Does anybody know why the alerts aren't showing up here? It's because we have 14 folders selected. So if I go down and I just use training, the idea is now I see alerts. So if your users have more than one folder selected and you're using alerts, they can't see alerts from their pipeline view. That sucks, but it's real. On top of that, I've got 6 alerts. Who's actually clicking this to see this? Probably no one. So the idea is I want to focus my team on leveraging workflow tasks and leveraging the task pipeline so they can focus on what work is due today and what work was due before today. Last part on that list is what work is due after today. And so, Lynn, did I answer your question? I see a chat on there. You're wondering how much you could fit into that advanced condition part. You can go as many times as you want. There's no limit. Just remember, like anything else in Encompass, the first true is used, right? So you want to make sure that your syntax is well defined, just like everywhere else in Encompass. But yeah, definitely use it. And if you come up with something that's really cool, please share it in the community. When you get into these task templates, I don't know why I just clicked that. That was dumb. So if you go into these admin, I don't know if you guys know this, but in your workflow tasks, you can come in here and you can check this and you can export and import. So if you come across with something cool that you feel like you want to brag and share, please do. Share it with others. If anybody comes up with one, let me know. If anybody needs one of these as a primer or wants to know how to build it, just ask in the community. We got a lot of moderators on there that can help out. It's okay to share. This is not secret IP stuff. This is just running a mortgage company. All right. So let's talk about the next step. Let's talk about resubmitting. And this is again where it gets to be really weird between companies. Some companies have a document-centric workflow for resubmission. Some have a condition-centric workflow. Some don't really choose. I'm always going to ask you to focus on condition-centric workflow. I'm always advocating that for myself and my companies and our clients. So what that means in English is that when we come in and we've got, prior to docs conditions that we've only got 1 out of 3 satisfied, I'm going into this condition by clicking once and clicking fulfilled. Now, recently on the community, there's been some chatter about automatically fulfilling conditions based upon the status of a document, which I would advocate against. And the reason why I would advocate against that is because if that document already has files in it, the document's already been received, right? And so if it doesn't, how do I know that the first file is actually what fulfilled that condition? And what I've got my underwriting team watching for in their pipeline view is the number of conditions that are marked as fulfilled. Right. So if we come in here, what we did was we marked. Let me see if I can save this first. Thank you. So we've got this condition marked as fulfilled. So now when I come over into this file, we can see it's been fulfilled. That's the last status update. And in the reporting database, there's actually a UWC.filled all or something or other. There's some custom field in there some native field that counts the number of fulfilled conditions that you can put on your pipeline views. And once that field updates, either one of two things, either use that to fire a workflow task to have the underwriter go back in. I never had to resubmit, did I? It's just there's a fulfilled condition, which I'm going to speak to in a second. Sean, I'll answer your question in a moment. Or nothing happens, and you're really dependent upon somebody finishing that resubmittal milestone to drive the underwriter. This is where it gets a little bit interesting. And what's peculiar about this is it depends on the channel. I don't know why, even in the same organization. My stance on this is that unless you can prove to me your underwriter is less efficient by working off of piecemeal, meaning I'm working off, I know this file has one fulfilled condition, let me go review it. Traditionally, what you can do is you can create this churn method of the underwriter comes in, they get notified that there's a file for them to review because there's a fulfilled condition. They're working off of, again, they're working off of their task list. So that review becomes prioritized. And when they get to it, when they get to that this file's got fulfilled conditions, you have one of two things that can be done. First thing that I'm always going to recommend is that they're going to open that task, they're going to go into that file, and they're going to go to the fulfill condition to go manage it. If you're really fancy, what I would encourage you to look at is once the file has no more fulfilled conditions, that task is automatically finished. They're not actually managing the task. It's just a means for the task pipeline to be alerted to their attention of how to prioritize that review. While the processor is still in that file, additional conditions can be fulfilled. Again, the underwriter can't access the loan until it's ready for them to access, meaning nobody else is in the file. So this concept of should we draw the attention to the underwriter to review the file, or should we let the fulfillment of the condition draw that action? This is completely up to you and your culture of your company. I can tell you that from a wholesale perspective or a TPO perspective, there are varied experiences. And so I'm going to kind of defer this up to you. In my company's underwriters are constantly reviewing conditions. They're in and out of files, looking at the condition itself. So they would come into this condition, they would review any notes in here, they would review the documents, and they would make a decision. They'd either clear that condition or they'd uncheck fulfilled, and they'd add a comment in here to be addressed. And if they need that to appear externally, they would do that too, if that's a TPO condition to be managed there. And so you can set it as internal or external. So Rebecca says lots of conditions and I'll come back to your question, Sean, I didn't forget. But Rebecca, on this topic, lots of conditions are actually dependent upon documentation needed from other conditions. I don't understand how piecemeal doesn't just lead to chaos. So Rebecca, just to be clear, this condition, in order to be fulfilled, needs to have very specific documents. So I'm not looking at the documents. So to your point, to your statement, lots of conditions are dependent on documentation needed from other conditions. I would ask for a good example if you can come up with one on the spot. If not, I'd love to continue the conversation outside of here in the community, just so everybody else can kind of follow along. But if I fulfill this condition, it's because I've received documentation that fulfills that condition. If you have a situation where conditions seem commingled, where you believe that the same document is satisfying multiple conditions, then I would say you probably got some condition cleanup to do. If you got situations where where you've got a split, I'm going to try to follow along here, but a split where you've got certain things needed, you need other conditions to be kind of managed before this condition. Again, I'd like to understand that better. I think what I'm hearing is perhaps maybe you've got suspense conditions that have got to be satisfied before prior to approval conditions. And to which I would say I'm going to lean on the processor, right? If I come into this condition and I can't actually clear it, I'm going to uncheck this. It's going to be like, dude, please get the other thing done first. Thanks. And if we continue to have problems where this condition gets fulfilled, I'm going to pick up the phone and call my team member and be like, yo, what's going on? Like, why do you keep sending me this thing when we're not ready? So I think that's certainly possible. But I think what I'm usually finding is that with that level of confusion or that level of overlap, I need to better define my condition for what I'm looking for, mostly because of what I'm going to lean into next, which is automation. So there's two ways to automate enhanced conditions. And the first way that I'm really leaning into at my company is the ability to define very specific reasons for that. Oh, thanks. Right. So we know we can do workflow rules to like fire flood automation, but what if the property is in a special hazard flood area? What do we do? Well, we know from this, you know, from the data that we can create a new rule, and based upon this, the field ID equaling A or whatever it is, special hazard, the result is I can actually run or fire, excuse me, an enhanced condition, which I always apply enhanced conditions. Thank you. And I can either do the whole button, radio button, which by the way is here, right? So that's under business rules and automated enhanced conditions, and that's this. So if I were to apply that workflow rule, every 192 of these is going to be reviewed to see if any of these are true. And if they're true, the outcome is going to be whatever that rule, whatever those automated conditions are. The reality is that if I need something specific for flood, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to go through and make sure that I only select conditions and I add them here. So where I'm leading you is that when it comes to the data changes that the processor is making, I want to make sure also that we're not playing leapfrog back and forth. I'm not updating the file to have a bunch of things that the underwriter is now going to discover based upon the data that's in the file. Chances are the documents that we received contain data, or the services that we received contain data, and we need to make sure that loan is always having the most recent conditions. And so, again, another reason why enhanced conditions is so important is because natively you can fully automate the underwriting process to manage conditions in your Encompass. Do not need third-party plugin, do not need third-party tech. One of the biggest changes that's happening to Encompass data integration is happening in 26.1 when ICE is rolling in the full appraisal XML, all the data points into Encompass. What does that mean? That means that if that appraisal XML file contains subject to completion, you can fire an automated condition to have the underwriter call for subject a 442 automatically. If it's got an appraiser in the file, I was saying file should, but that appraiser gets mapped. We can now map that directly into file context to update fraud and do other things through automated services. How is all this important to getting a file ready from processing to clear to close? Because when we're fetching these final conditions, it's the mortgage business and things always happen. Always. Going through this myself right now. And so we need bank statements. We get bank statements in. Oh, the borrower's cash to close is different. We get to update a condition. Remember, one of the things that we can do in here is update the enhanced condition tracking status. So what that means in English is if we know that something comes in and it's, I don't know, the income tax transcripts, we can now set that status to something that we want. All this is really critical because when we go through the workflow challenges of going from processing back to underwriting, I need to make sure that not only am I tracking the individual conditions and their status, but mostly the parts that I need to grab from the borrowers and third parties. So I'm going to go back to what Sean asked me a few minutes ago. Thanks for being patient, Sean. So in the community is a repository of objects like tasks, business rules. Yeah, we actually do share a lot in the resource center, Sean, but in terms of like a library of pulling down, no, we don't. And the reason why is because they've got to be put in context. And every one of those objects has kind of a story that goes along with it. What I would say, Sean, is when you go to need something, if you're having trouble building it or you're not quite sure how to build it, just ask in the community. Maybe somebody's already got that built, or maybe we can help you work through to where you can get the experience of building it yourself. That's kind of the whole thing. grabbing it and throwing it in your system and seeing if it works can be fun, but it's not really helping you in true context. So I would just guide you on that. All right, so where are we here? We've got the files conditionally approved. We have the file that has some conditions marked as fulfilled. We've got the processor still having open tasks. I want to go back to underwriting for a second. And one thing that's really important to understand is the difference, sorry about that, difference between standard conditions and enhanced. It's really, really important. So if I'm in a file in standard conditions, and I've got these are all like closing private docs, but let's bring in a condition. Oh wait, actually, let's do this. So I've got this condition and it's prior to docs, and it's to be it'll look like this, right? Usually. Sometimes it'll look like this. But in any event, we're going to send this condition to the table. In standard conditions, we can do this. We can do closer and allow to clear. And this will override any other setting that we've got built in Encompass to do this. And from an operations perspective, it seems like it's great because the underwriter is just deciding, and we trust the underwriter, right? We trust the closer is going to do this, right? So in enhanced conditions, it doesn't work this way. And this is why I'm bringing this up. Again, I'm not trying to make this an admin training session, but I do want to talk about the specifics of how things work. When we get into enhanced conditions, sorry, I don't know why I just went to here. When we get into enhanced conditions, I'll get my act together. We have to deal with condition types. So enhanced conditions, we have to get into condition types. This is hard for some people to put their heads around because if we have all of our standard conditions going into the enhanced condition underwriting type and we don't allow a closer role, pardon me, to clear or waive, you cannot just make this change on the fly in a loan file. And by far, this is one of the hardest things that companies have, what I've discovered in migrating from standard to enhanced conditions, is to define out of these 614 which conditions are allowed to be cleared by closing or not, right? And so in this particular environment, all of these conditions can be are the closing type. And the closing type in English means that the closer role, as well as the underwriter and funder roles, are all allowed to manage those conditions. So in enhanced conditions, it's really important to get this concept down because when I'm trying to move between processing and underwriting and ultimately get that clear to close, I've got to know ahead of time which conditions I might want to, as a company, might want to allow to send to the closing table to be cleared by the closer. And so when you're thinking about making this move over to enhanced conditions, this is usually where people get stuck. And I'm going to give you a little bit of a cheat code here. Here's the cheat code. All you're going to do is take the 614, whatever your condition count is. I've done them up to 1,000 or even over 1,000 for multi-channel environments. All I want you to do is tell me which conditions are not allowed to be cleared by anybody other than the underwriter. That's the first step because that's your biggest cohort. And then your second one is, okay, which conditions are only that are not allowed to be cleared by anybody other than the closer, because it's usually the two people involved, the two roles involved. And then the rest are going to be, okay, which ones are allowed to be cleared by processing if you allow them to do it at all. And that's where you can define your condition types. Gang, it's that straightforward. It's that simple. And so when I go through and I'm converting over from standard to enhanced, those are, again, there might be others, but those are the three big macro ones that I usually come across. And why is this helpful in our workflow conversation today? Because when I go into my loan file and I go into my E folder, wrong one. Okay, I told you I get my act together sooner or later. It's this one. If I go over into my loan file and I go into my enhanced conditions, so that's where I need to camp out. I want to be able to make sure that I don't need to worry about who can clear it, right? This is a concept thing. But if I want to make a file, if I go into, I'll go into the prior to approval, and I go into access to funds, this condition in here, right? And I can change prior to. So now I can make this prior to closing. I can't change the condition type. Okay, I can change the owner, but that doesn't change the ability to manage these statuses. And if we look at here, we can see what the status of this condition type is. I can see the loan officer can review them, can receive them, underwriter can clear them. Nobody else. And I can't do anything about it. I can't change this to the closer. So if I had closer in this condition type, it would show me. It's nuanced, but it's important because what I want to have happen in my files is I want to be able to easily identify what's now prior to closing. So if I were to go in, I didn't save changes because I'm going too fast. But if I go here prior to closing, hit save. So I'm not saving the file, I'm just saving the condition. So now I've got a condition moved over into prior to closing, right there, 12. So if I were to uncheck this and check that, there's that access to funds prior to closing. Why is this helpful? Because if I've got, as a processor, if I've got this condition fulfilled, it now allows me to get the closure to come in, and they can come in and see which conditions are fulfilled. They can go into that, open it, they can go and review it, whether it's a pre-closing review or an at-closing review. They can look at what they have and they can say, yep, I've cleared it. Does anybody have in your workflow today, does anybody have situations where you after the file closes, you have open, non-cleared conditions? Yeah. Yeah. For those of you that are listening to me and while you're multitasking or whatever you're doing, I guarantee if I go into your pipeline, I'll find loans that you've closed and you have open conditions. It's a problem. It's a problem for a lot of reasons, but most of all, I can't tell what the hell happened. Did we not need the condition? Was it missed? So I'm going to just again guide you in the perfect workflow. If those are conditions that are not clear, then they probably aren't needed. I'm looking for those. I'm looking for those examples post-closing, and I'm saying, why do we even have this condition? Well, Sean, if you've got post-closing conditions, then you're fine, right? So Sean's like, we do, they're post-closing conditions. That's cool. Keep on there. But now I'm going to ask you, Sean, are your post-closers clearing all those conditions prior to completion? Right? Because again, if we have conditions, we want to make sure they're cleared. And the answer is yes. And again, all that's great. What I would kind of roll into here is again from a complete workflow, right? From processing through getting that CTC. One of the things you haven't really heard me talk about at all are milestone requirements, right? I don't function on milestones in most workflows. These are just kind of gates. In the past, we were always about this: required documents for a milestone, required tasks, required fields for a milestone. I'm okay with that in some context, but I'm telling you right now, in the modern workflow, what I really find and found more value is making sure that the fields that we're looking for are actually part of tasks that are required. Because guess what, gang? Guess what? In case you didn't know this, let me be the first to show you. In milestone completion business rules, under the task tab, you got workflow tasks. Big deal. So if you didn't know you had these, welcome to the party. If you did know you have them, are you using them? Where are you using them? Because if you've got this, like look at all this stuff, right? I've got all these things needed as possible, but I don't have any of them in my workflow tasks. What's that going to look like next year? So I'm worried about that for everybody. Um, yeah, Candace. Well, yep, Lisa, there you go. So now you don't. So there's that. I want you to think about that. I want you to also think about when you're looking at your pipeline view. One of the things that you can have on here, here's the fulfilled. There's that field. So I can see clearly in my desktop pipeline view, I can see fulfill conditions. All right, so there's only one, but whatever. But most importantly, I really want to guide you through. You're going to see, for those that are going. By the way, anybody who's thinking about going to ICE, make sure you use our discount code, $250 off, even the early bird price. Supposedly, like tomorrow, or the next day, everybody's going to be able to register for ICE if it hasn't already been done. It might have went today. Make sure you use our discount code, and then we'll be at ICE in our booth. We've got a 10 by 20 booth. Half of it's going to be workflow zone. So if you're there, check it out. It's going to be really cool. And then for those that are also, if you can stay an extra day, there's going to be a lot of really fun details for the wrap-up event. That's going to be workshop based. And I think Zach Sharkey is going to be making an announcement soon about JavaScript. I know he sent an email out to a bunch of people, but we're collaborating on some really cool stuff. So more to come on that. I will post the code back up in the community, Jillian, definitely. So wait, there's questions. We have a workflow rule to update condition status to request and no option to update people used to AdCom. I don't know what the heck you're talking about, Lynn. We have a workflow rule to update condition status. Oh, to request it. Okay. No option to update to added. No, because you can't update a condition to added because as soon as you create the condition, it is added, right? So if we go over here, you come into condition. If we just create a new condition, its automatic status is added. You can't modify that. It's like you can't modify the file started like it is. If it exists, it is. So you would not do that. As far as updating the condition status, again, as I said earlier, I would be really mindful about that. I don't always know if the condition status should be updated. Exceptions could be if they are service-based conditions. So in English, if the condition is to review the appraisal and the appraisal service has been fulfilled, maybe that's a call to action. Or if you've got like fraud, maybe that's a call to action, but I'd be really careful about that. Check it out either way. Lisa asked, does the fulfill condition matter if you're on either standard or enhanced? No. I'm assuming you mean the pipeline view, Lisa. So yeah, the condition counter will update for standard or enhanced conditions. So that's been shown to work reliably. So definitely use that. Lisa says registration's open, so that's cool. And let's see, in the community, I'll bring it up real quick. Any other questions, right? I'm trying to be good about these meetings and leave time for questions also. Discount. Let's see what we got here. Discount. There it is. There it is, Jillian. Use that one. I think we came in 4th place last year. I want to win, but the MI companies always win because they give them out to all their companies. But I definitely want to beat. I want to be as close as I can to number 1 as possible. So use a discount code, save $250. Be happy. Any other questions about like how to do what I talked about or thoughts? Ideally, when you're running through underwriting as an underwriter, I want my underwriters to come into web. I want them to look at their conditions on a resubmission and come here and say, do I have what I need, and get the hell out. Now, the initial review, I still got to figure out the workflow because I'm still not convinced on how to do it yet in web, but on the resubmissions, mean, I should be able to have my underwriters fly through here because they literally will just come in to the condition list, see what they're doing, if they're PTCs or PTDs, or if you're doing TPO, PTFs or PTPs, and they can just go in and look at fulfilled, right? You can do this and you can just do fulfilled, and bang, I got my list. Go into it, review the documents that were attached, look at any notes if I need any notes, look at any annotations if I've got that. If I want to search, remember, if I want to search for stuff, I can search for military. And there's all the militaries. So it's really phenomenal what you can do with native Encompass. And that was the whole point of this workshop series, is to do that, is to be able to do this. And if you don't like what you see, unfulfill it. I don't personally like rejection because that's kind of weird. In conditions, it's either fulfilled or it's not. If it's fulfilled, it's either cleared or waived, or it's not fulfilled. I have seen people use the requested, re-requested. Again, I don't like that because that's a document you're requesting, not a condition. But check it out. You got to make your own workflow make sense. I haven't found good uses for that. Lisa asks, how much is the Thursday after ice? I'm still figuring that out. I know it says like $750, but with the workshops, I'm seeing if I can get some sponsors of the workshops and try to drive the price down to zero. That way it's really affordable. I know you got to pay for an extra. Well, if you check out that day, right? So if usually everybody's leaving that Thursday, so just make your flights as late as possible. Last year we had like, I don't know, what do we have? Like 10 people stayed until 5. It's fully catered. Like, we make sure you have plenty to eat and drink. And I think this next one, we're going to do workshops, because I want to do a workflow workshop with Christy Younger, our workflow documentation specialist, to really explore that. And I'm trying to do other parts of the workshop, so it's not just admins, but it's also other people that would get value out of that wrap-up event, who are also at ICE, if there are any other job titles there. So thank you, Candace, for that recommendation. Appreciate it. All right, gang. So here's your checklist. You ready? Get to enhanced conditions. Get to workflow tasks. Make sure you're using workflow automation rules to fire these things, if nothing else. You don't have to do them in order. A lot of companies find success in leveraging workflow tasks first because they can be used in the desktop interface as well as web interface. Workflow rules, remember, work on either interface. It's a workflow rule is for the file, not to the interface, right? So everything that we do in here, and again, if you're not the admin, share this with your admin, share this recording with your admin. All of these settings don't care what interface you're using. Now, naturally, workflow tasks with task workspaces do care, but the notification templates, schedulers, workflow tasks, workflow rules, all this is interface agnostic. I can make your workflow dance with the right settings and with the right recommendations. So if you have any questions about today, how to get your underwriters clear to close, even if they're leveraging desktop, and even if you're using standard conditions, there's still a ton of work you can do. It's just a little bit different, but I do want you working towards leveraging ultimately Encompass Web, especially for resubmissions, because it's just so powerful to get things through. So if you have any questions, hang back, ask away. If you don't have any questions, enjoy the rest of your day. I appreciate you coming. And we've got 3 more parts of this series to get to. So we'll see you at the next ones. You're welcome, Gabe. Thanks for coming. It's like no other questions. Sarah's clapping. Appreciate that. Let's see what else we got going on. Do we have questions? You're welcome. Okay, so I guess we're done. Nobody has questions. You guys have an awesome day. Thanks, Sean. Get off alerts. Use workflow tasks. You should do a workflow task for every alert and see how that goes. I think that would be good. I'll see you guys. Bye for now.